Hello everyone, how are you all doing? Let's study about a design pattern used in programming. This design pattern is called the repository pattern and it is used to create an abstraction between the data model and the business logic. I've got two patterns over here, active record pattern and repository pattern. Active record pattern is an abstraction layer, repository pattern is also an abstraction layer. The major difference lies between how it is consumed by the higher class, because usually there is a high level class and a low level class. So there is a dependency on both of them. So this is where the repository pattern behaves much more better and creates separation between application. Pattern creates an abstraction layer and creates an object of a database table or a view and wraps it in a class. On the other hand, the repository pattern creates an abstraction of the data model. And what is the difference? The repository pattern is not closely associated with a database. So tomorrow, in case you decide that your application needs to scale further, if you want to build a better application, better scalable application, so you can attach multiple databases to the repository, the same repository, or you can immediately switch the repository. So let's go ahead and understand what do you need to know to understand and implement a repository pattern. So there are three things that you need to understand before going ahead. One is a dependency inversion principle. Okay. The second is inversion of control. That's a design pattern again. And the third is dependency injection. So now again, so there is a lot of dependency word that I've been using here, but just calm down, listen to what I'm saying and try to understand the difference between the three. So the first principle that we are going to learn is the dependency inversion principle. Modules should not depend on low-level modules. Both of them should depend on abstraction layers. So what do I mean by abstraction? I've been doing abstraction in all this logic, right? All this time. But there is a big significance of why you need to understand what is abstraction. So abstraction is actually implemented all throughout your life. You have been implementing it in your studies, you have been implementing it while you're driving the car, you have been implementing it even when you're actually programming. So abstraction is everywhere in your life. You just need to understand. Once you understand the concept of abstraction, you will love to deeply dive into what is abstraction, what is working behind the scenes, and then you'll be more efficient in what you're doing. Abstraction is when you do not know what is going on in the background, but you're still able to use all the features, all the classes, all the functions that are provided by that entity. Okay, for example, when you're driving a car, I'll give you a real life example for better understanding here. When you're driving a car, you have the steering wheel, you have the clutch, you have the brake, you have the gear. So all these things, all these objects are controlled by you, right? That is when you are able to use the entire car using only few controls that you understand. But what exactly goes in the background is an abstraction for you, right? There is an abstraction layer which when you put a gear, a command is sent to the abstraction layer. The abstraction layer converts it to a command that the control understands, that the electronics understand in your car, and that is how you drive your car. So this is a very simple example. Like this is an example. Again, one more example is when you type something on the keyboard, right? Some commands are sent to your motherboard, and then there comes something on your screen. So this is one more example. So all our lives are full of abstractions. We just need to understand and its behavior so that we are more included or we get more involved. I've seen it in my college days. I've seen it after my college days. All students, not all students, but many students, many people, many candidates who appear for interviews struggle to tell you the difference between an abstraction layer and an interface. So what's the difference between an abstract class and an interface? So I leave it up to you. Okay, you tell me a few differences between, you put it in the comment section. What difference do you know about the abstraction class, and the interface. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. To bring a diagram of how this repository patterns are implemented in your programming. Let it be any programming language, it can be basically implemented in many different ways. People are, it doesn't have a very hard way to implement, but then it is very important to understand what is the right way to implement it. Okay, so I'll bring up a diagram on my screen and I'm going to explain it to you how it works. An example about the dependency inversion principle would be, you create a high level class, okay, that is your business logic. Then you create a data model. Whenever you want to make them interact with each other, you build an abstraction layer in between, which pulls data from the data model, sends data to the business logic. Okay, so whenever you want to make any kind of change of the data that you're sending to the business logic, you don't need to edit any code in your business logic. Okay, so now here you're removing the dependency between the data layer and the business logic by putting an abstraction layer in between. Is that right? I hope you all understood this. I'll give you an example in the coming sessions. Okay, but try to understand removal of the dependency for business logic interaction and for data layer interaction is what is known as dependency inversion principle.
We have covered the dependency inversion principle, and now we are going to see how do we implement the dependency inversion principle. IOC is a concept, that is inversion of control, is a design pattern to go ahead and implement the dependency inversion principle.
There are many ways to use this pattern, that is the IOC pattern, but we are going to talk only about one way, that is the dependency injection. Pay utmost importance over here, because dependency injection is a design pattern again, which is a part of inversion of control. Okay, so inversion of control is a design pattern. Dependency injection is one of the ways to implement IOC. Okay, so again, dependency injection is also a design pattern because it belongs to IOC. Put this in a very simple way. Dependency injection is a design pattern in which an object or a function receives other objects or functions that it depends on. Okay, super simple. I will repeat myself again. Dependency injection is a design pattern in which an object or function receives other objects and functions on which they depend on. Okay, now why is it done in this way? Why can't we go ahead and use the old way of creating objects of a class, instantiating an object, and then using its function? Okay, this is the actual reason why we implement dependency injection, is because we want to remove the dependency of creating an object and then using the functions and the classes, or the functions of the base class. Dependency injection pattern aims to not create objects of a class and then use them. Okay, so it directly uses the functions or objects of another class and starts using them. This creates very loosely coupled programs which you can extend, and it can be used anywhere in your program. That's the beauty of dependency injection. Show you live examples of how to implement dependency injection, and if you have any other questions regarding dependency injections or why it is used, or if you want to ask me something related to programming, you can leave a comment. I'll be very happy to help you. The next part is the exciting part of the video, that is actual programming. How do you implement the repository pattern? Which programming language or which framework I'm going to use to implement the repository pattern? And let's see, if you have any questions, I'll try to explain as much as I can in this short video that I'm creating. But if you have any concerns, if you have any more questions related to how you can do or implement the repository pattern, I'm open to it. Leave a comment and I'll get back to you. So let's jump into it. Let's go ahead and start a Laravel program. That means a Laravel is a basic installation that you'll have to do first. After installing your Laravel, you connect it to a database. Probably, I usually use MySQL. So you can use MySQL, Mongo, or you want to use Postgres or any of the databases, whether it's relational or non-relational, doesn't matter. It should just have a model view controller pattern, okay, your Laravel installation. So once that MVC structure is all set, your Laravel installation is ready. Now I will take you all through to that section where you actually go ahead and create a repository pattern. Okay, now the step number one is to go ahead and create a folder that is called a repository folder under app folder. Okay, so the root of your application will have the app folder. Under the app folder you need to create the repository folder. All right, to implement the repository in Laravel PHP, we have to create a certain structure. Now this structure is on the left hand side and you can see it as app folder. Inside the app folder there is a repositories folder here. I have created one repository, that is admin's repository. Okay. Now let's start exploring the files related to repository here. The structure of creating repositories inside, as there are multiple repositories in the repositories folder, I am structuring it into a folder. So each module, that is each model that we are going to connect to, will be having a folder, and inside that model folder we will put all our repositories. So each repository has two files. One is an interface and one is a class. Okay, a repository itself. So let's start exploring what's an interface doing over here. So a basic definition of an interface is that in interface all your variables and methods are defined. Okay, it's just a definition of it and not an explanation of it. So we have done the same thing here. We have defined all the CRUD, basically the CRUD methods that we require. Okay, that is get admin by ID, get admin by name, add admin, update admin, delete admin. So these are very basic functions that we require in our class that we are going to explore next. So just a refresher, understand what's the difference between a class and an interface. If you have any questions related to that, if you have any questions related to the difference between the two, you can put it in the comment section. Let's go ahead and open the admin's repository. So this is a class which is implementing the admin interface. It's an interface. That means all the functions defined in that interface should be used in the class. Okay, what I mean is if I have defined few functions that are mentioned here, get all, like all the CRUD functions of any module in the interface, it is a mandatory step or it is a mandatory principle to use all these functions in this class. Now before entering into the conversation of how a repository is implemented as per code, let me explain you the concept of dependency injection here. So on line number 5, you see that we have imported the QC admins model. Okay, so this model is directly associated to a database table, and then we are avoiding to use this model directly into our business logic. So what we are doing is, inside this repository we are importing this model. We are doing a dependency injection here on line number 13. Now once we allocate this object, or once we assign this object to this model variable, we can now use all the functionality of the model, the QC admins model, in this repository. So that's what we have done here. In the get all functions on line number 20, we have pulled all the admin data, okay, all the admin records in that model, basically in that table that it refers to. Over here on line number 25, what we are doing is we are getting the first record which matches this ID, and similarly we have done the rest of the functions. So let me jump directly to the add admin function. Now what we are doing is as this model, this variable now refers to the model, we are assigning this name. Okay, we are assigning the data name to the column name of that table. Okay, because now, as I said before, let's rewind a bit. The QC admins model is referencing a database table. Okay, now that database table has multiple columns. One of the columns is name, the other column is age. So we are assigning data name, this variable, to the column. Okay, that means it's a record in the column that we are assigning. Okay, and then we are calling the save function of that model. So this will save a record in this table. Similarly, here we are updating the admin and we are putting a where condition here and we are deleting an admin over here. So with this, we are done understanding how an interface is implemented in a class, how a dependency injection pattern is adopted and used in a repository. Step is to understand how an interface acts as an abstraction layer between the business logic and the data model. So let's move on to the next part, that is understanding how an interface is used in the business logic, that is a controller. Let me open this HTTP folder, controllers. I'll go to admin controller. Now here on line number 6, you see that we are importing the interface. Okay, the same admin interface that we saw previously. Now this admin interface is again injected here. So the dependency injection pattern is again adopted here and implemented. So this is the constructor. What we are doing is we are injecting this class here. This is an object of the class. And here on line number 11, we have defined a private variable, that is admin interface. Now we are assigning this object of admin interface to the admin interface variable that we have created. Why we do this? Because we don't need to again and again use the object over here. We can use the reference and then we can start using all the functions that we have defined in the repository. So now let's go to line number 19 in the index function. On line number 20, we are using the variable, okay, which is referring to the object, and then we call the get all functions that we have defined in the repository. Let me open the repository here, get all. Okay, but here the difference is you all must be thinking, why are we using the repository instead of why are we using the interface instead of using the repository? Because we have to implement abstraction and hence we are using the interface, not the class directly. So now we are done understanding how a repository, that is a class, and an interface interact with each other, and how an interface is then used in the controller, how the distribution is done, how we have created an abstraction layer. Now to understand it further, how is this interface interacting with the repository to use its functions? Okay, so let's go to that part where we will go to the core functionality of Laravel, where we bind or we relate this class, the repository and the interface. So we have to create this route service provider. This is a provider. Similarly, we have to create a repository service provider. Okay, so now this is a custom service provider that we have created. So these are all I would say the core files when a Laravel project initiates or loads. These are all the core classes that is loaded into the session. Okay, so we see that we are first importing the admin interface and we are also importing the admin's repository. the register function. So this service provider has two functions. There is a boot function and there is a register function. I will not get deep into that because that's a different topic altogether, but I will explain what this line of code means. 18, okay, line number 18. So there are two ways of binding classes. Okay, there is it's called singleton and it's called a bind. So I could have also done it in this way. Okay, bind, but the purpose of it is different. So I'll tell you what singleton does and what bind does. When a singleton pattern is used, only one object is created whenever a class is initiated. That means one object can be used throughout the session of this application. Okay, so if you need a shared instance of this class, you use singleton pattern. A bind pattern is used when you need multiple instances of the same class throughout the session. So what I mean by that is, whenever the class is instantiated, each time a new object is created and there is no reference to the old object that was created. So now we are at the end of the video. I have explained you a lot of topics related to repository pattern, how repository pattern is implemented in Laravel, how we follow the three main concepts, that is dependency inversion, inversion of control, and dependency injection. Dependency inversion is a principle, IOC is a pattern, and dependency injection is one of the patterns that can be implemented in IOC. Okay, what's an abstraction, what are interfaces, what's an active record pattern, what's a repository pattern, the difference between the two have been explained in this video. So I'll be glad if you all have any concerns, any doubts regarding this entire concept about the implementation. You can leave a comment, ask me. I will 100% reply. I will help you all implement repository pattern for a better structure of your code. If you like this entire concept of repository pattern and the way I've explained it to you all, and do share it with your friends who are into programming, who are beginning their career in programming, so that they understand the importance of learning design patterns. Learning design patterns can be pretty tricky if you don't get to implement it during your production implementation or test implementations. It can be very difficult to understand or remember what it means, but do go ahead and try implementing it in your organizations or wherever you work, or if you're a freelancer, you have a great chance of exploring this opportunity of implementing different design patterns wherever required. So give a thumbs up if you like it. Hit the bell button, because I'll be coming up with more and more videos related to different concepts in programming. Okay, all right. So y'all have a great day and thank you for watching. Bye bye.